My name is Martha Kessler. As Grant said, I have been affiliated and associated with Facet5 for about 9 years. You'll hear a little bit more about that as we go through this presentation. Congruism came out of me feeling very cattywampus and misaligned in my own work and my own career. And I really focus on aligning people's values, beliefs, and actions. So getting congruent with who they are. Everyone has a bit of an ism, whatever that is. For some people, it's an incredibly short memory. For some people, it's alcoholism or drug addiction. For other people, it's work. Whatever that is, we want to get your values, beliefs aligned with the actions that you're taking. But today I'm going to be talking to you about teams. And I believe most of you signed up for optimizing team dynamics for high performance. Well, I got to tell you straight away that that is really um, just get here so I can click. That's really sort of a bull name. Okay. It I'm embarrassed to say it because it's a name that I derived as an executive order was being signed in the United States by a US president and terminating all of the DEI related mandates, policies, programs, and activities across the federal government in the United States. It was made up as universities that I was working with Facet5. Their grants were canceled and educators were being issued edicts to remove words from the classrooms. It was made up as planefuls of brown people were being flown out of the United States, the land of the free, without due process. I made it up as more and more US government agencies were being closed, gutted, and people that I respected and worked for, I just heard from 3 more yesterday, were being locked out of their office, labeled as poor performers to halt the meaningful work that they're doing. I made up that title out of fear. And I remember having a conversation with Grant about it. I made up that conversation out of fear, and that fear has now turned to anger, and that anger has now turned to action. And so today we are going to be talking about diverse teams, and we're going to talk about them deliberately and by design. We're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, words that have been reduced to an acronym that I admittedly used, but I won't use any longer. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are words not to be eradicated by those who use DEI as a single word, as a threat, designed to evoke fear, as it did in me. Um, we're we're going to talk about diversity as a fact, equity as a choice, inclusion as an action, and belonging as an outcome. Because it's true for every team, and we are going to talk about teams, every team that runs a project, and every individual that shows up as a member of a team. So now that you have a bit of a sense of where I stand on this topic today, we're going to talk about it intentionally because these are not buzzwords. They are the backbones of high performing teams. They aren't dangerous words, they're powerful. And this conversation isn't about theory. It's a call for action for you so that we can develop and specifically design the teams that we lead with the people that we need. So let's get a sense of who's in the room. I'm going to invite you to just go ahead and click on or take a picture of this QR code, or I believe Grant's going to pop that in the chat for us. You can go to a Mentimeter, and I'm going to be asking that you provide 3 words that you can use to describe or convey who you are. And let's see, there we go. Got a few coming in. Hopefully we'll get a few more. All right. Passionate, supportive, non-judgmental, joyful, friendly, easygoing, creative, psychologist, lots of passion. I like that. I'm a little passionate myself if you didn't gather that from the very beginning. Okay, wonderful. So those words that we're seeing here, some of them are descriptors of our roles. Some of them are descriptors of how we might describe our personality or how we might show up. Some of it is around sometimes, yep, father. So my role in the family, how I affiliate myself. Oops, I'm going to do one other thing real quick before we go out of that. Um, there we go. Um, and so when we're thinking about those words, this is diversity and it's real and it's right here in our Zoom room with us. That's that kind of complexity that we bring when we all come together. And this is a model that I like. It's from Anita Rowe and Lee Gardenswaltz, and they were pioneers in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for more than 50 years. And what it's highlighting is just that idea of that sense of diversity is more than what we can see. So things like I may not be able to look at you and see that you're a father or a psychologist, but those are definitely pieces of that diversity. They're about and what I like about this is that sense of multiple layers. And I'm confident it doesn't call out everything. The research shows that, again, this idea of diversity, it isn't a fringe or a single definition. In a recent study that the Oxford Review did, they noted that in our global economy, employees today spend um, more than half of their time in groups or meetings with people that are quite different than themselves. So I'm curious, pop in the chat when you're told we need to have a diverse team look at that. What are the words that come to mind? Just pop those in the chat for me if you would. Creative and balanced, different ways of thinking and seeing, innovation, skills, multidisciplinary, multi-talented, different backgrounds, inclusive. Absolutely. Absolutely. Curious or curiosity, good. Different levels. I love all of those all of those descriptors. And so we throw this word of team around a lot, but not every group is a team. So I don't know if you've ever heard this story before or heard this said in the hallway. We need to pull a team together to work on that. And let's see. Jill's not doing much. Sam's been floating around since he got kicked off that other project. And we've got that new guy. And then, oh, don't forget Morgan. If we don't bring somebody in from Morgan's team, they'll get all upset, and we've got to have that. Oh, and by the way, I think there's an executive who's got that guy that's been, kind of working with him who he wants to lead. Anybody ever heard that sort of a conversation? I'm seeing some head nods, some smiles. Okay. So, how do we take that group of people and build a high performing team? What's the difference between a group and a team? Let's pop that in the chat if you would. I don't like to do all the work, so I have you guys get involved and engaged there. So, thoughts about the difference between a group and a team. Team has a shared goal, group is brought together, team has a sense of purpose, shared purpose. Okay. Common goals. Relationship, team dynamics, and relationships in between. Wonderful. Thank you. And so The difference between a group and a team, in a lot of ways, there are a number of different lenses that we can look at that through. And one of those is through selection. Teams are built by design, not by default, like that little story that I was just relaying that seemed very familiar to some folks. The orientation of a team is interdependent, not independent. And so, what I find fascinating is that, and we're going to get to some statistics later, but the number of times that we are asked to work in teams, even in high school or in university, we're asked to work in teams, but the grade is individual. The performance is measured individually, even though the focus is on the teamwork. So, if my orientation is independent, how does that relate to the team versus where the interdependency is what will truly make up a high-performing team? And to that same sense, there's that sense of ownership of the outcome. And when we're working on a team, that is, we're significantly more invested in that outcome. It's less transactional. We're not in it for what I'll give this if I can get that. We're invested in the ownership and in the outcome. Our skills, somebody mentioned that in the chat about skills, and that was part of the difference. Those skills on a team are complementary. How often have you wound up in a group that was called a team to work on this, and you realized you didn't have anybody who really had that deep, maybe cyber expertise or the marketing expertise that you might need? And well, wait a minute, this is who we've got to work with. So we'll either go Google it and make it up or go to, as opposed to going and finding who you really needed to be a part of that team that you're putting together. There's a sense of trust, and someone else mentioned that sense of relationship and trust. People on a team will give people the benefit of the doubt. They assume that there is not malicious intent or that ideas are being questioned because you want to make them stronger and better. One of the things I like, tool that I use with teams is to play the game. What I like about this is, and what I like about that idea is, and so that there's just this constant building on it, as opposed to, well, have you thought about this? Or have you thought, what I like about that idea is this, and because there's always something that you can find in there. And that's on the flip side of really, just constantly feeling questioned or feeling like I need to justify. Why questions, as you all know, as professionals, should be really minimized. They put people on the defensive. In teams that are high performing, conflict gets resolved as opposed to being avoided. It's when a conflict arises, it's unpacked in a more healthy way. And oftentimes the team comes out much stronger for it because, again, you're going back down. If you think about the ladder of inference, generally what causes conflict is that people have run up that ladder really quickly. And if you can back down the emotions, the values, the understanding, the lenses that people are applying to the situation that's going on, you can get to a place where you're able to resolve conflict rather than just avoiding it or moving away from it. High performance teams generally are jointly determined, or they jointly determine the direction they're going to go. They know that there's an outcome, but the way that they're going to approach that outcome when we're thinking about developing a team deliberately is jointly determined. What are we doing? How are we going to approach it? Who do we need? Those kinds of questions versus here's what you're going to do. And oftentimes, here's how you're going to do it. That doesn't leave room for that creativity that we talked about being so important. Hopefully that makes sense. And I know I spent a lot of time on that, but it really is. It's multidimensional. And all too often it's like, oh, let's get a team together and we'll go do that. Without the thought that needs to get put behind it. Because random doesn't equal diverse, and available doesn't equal qualified. We've really got to be deliberate in how we create and build those teams. So maybe the question that we need to be asking isn't about how do we build a diverse team. It's really the question that we need to be asking might be, how do we build teams that work? How do we build teams that value difference, that enable belonging, that don't waste time managing perceptions, that bring creativity and learn from mistakes and get things done? And it's important to start with the end in mind. Understand that success is needed, understand how you're going to measure that success, and then build intentionally to it. And now you're thinking probably, yeah, my clients are going, yeah, no, that takes way too much time. Anybody hear that from their clients when you tell them you want to be deliberate about who you're picking to come into the team? Yeah, I'm seeing a few more head nods. And certainly my experience. And what I get is this sense of we can't go slow. We've got to just get in there and get it done. And it does take time. And my clients do push back. But my smarter leaders who I get to go back to and work with say that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It's not done. And so it's not done as a means to slow down the process. It's really about investing, taking stock, and putting things in front of the process. I shared a statistic I share this with a lot of clients, that really 40% of the time that we're working should be spent actually doing the work, really working on the outcome of the team. 40% should be talking about how we're going to get that work done. Who's going to be doing what? How are we going to bring in the research? It's really that digestion of how are we going to get the work done? What are the pieces that we need? 10% is exploring lessons learned so that we can learn from those, we can build on those, any mistakes, we can build on successes. And 10% is spent celebrating, or should be. So the response I get from people is, oh, I only have to work 40% of the time. Great. No, all of that is work. And if we'll invest that 40% up front, talking about how we're actually going to get the work done, significantly less rework is required. So teams become more successful and they're having a better time, feeling more creative, feeling more included as they're going about and getting the work done. I was just looking in to see if there was anything in the chat. So there are a lot of team dynamics models. I am familiar with a number of them. Some of the folks on this call have different perspectives about the best ones to use. My go-to is the Drexler-Sibbitt model of high-performance teams. If you're familiar with that model, give me a quick thumbs up. Anybody familiar with Drexler-Sibbitt? Yep, great. Thank you. The thing that I really like about this model is that it guides us through these individual questions. It guides us through this sense of orientation of, why am I here? Why are you here? Can I trust you? What's being asked of me? That's where we get into that goal clarification. And then also, am I willing to commit? Now, sometimes, again, if it's that team that got pulled together in the hallway because it was this random group of people, oftentimes you don't feel like you can commit or not. I've I've had people come to me and say, can you work on this project with us? And one of the things I want to know is what is your expectation of my time? Because I may or may not be able to give you that amount of time. I may or may not have the right expertise, so I may be able to refer somebody who can. So that sense of really thinking about why am I here? Why is it that you're coming to me? But also, why are these other people here? Begins to help us build some of that trust. And you can see here, the other thing I like about this is that it talks about what happens when these pieces or these steps go unresolved, but also when they are resolved. At the end of the presentation, I was going to say this morning, but I know a lot of you are, it's afternoon and even early evening. At the end of the talking, there, I'm going to pop this model with a cheat sheet in the chat so you can download it and take a look at it. Because when teams really go through these steps, they get that sense of clarity of purpose, trust before the push, inclusion, of that enables that ownership that we were talking about. Now, you'll notice that I've only focused on the left-hand side of the model, and that really is that sense of creating. There's a whole nother side to this model, which is around the sustaining. And that's that piece about, really beginning to look at how do we move into implementation? How do we recognize that high performance and so forth? But I really want to be intentional about how we're creating high performing teams. Employees now spend about 85% of their time collaborating on tasks. And that 85% includes managing dysfunction and rework. So that rework that I was talking about that takes so much extra time. But that sense of the dysfunction, the rework, and the substandard outcomes. So investing up front really does lower the amount of time that it takes teams to accomplish those better outcomes, and it increases employee satisfaction. All of those are measurable. And that's actually those statistics come out of a Gallup poll that was done in 2023. Disengaged employees cost the global economy. Anybody want to take a guess? How much it costs? Disengaged employees cost, yep, billions. Yep. Actually, even trillions. 8.8 trillion, or roughly 9% of the global GDP, is caused by disengaged employees. And, I can only propose to you right at the moment how disengaged some of the US government workers that I know are right at the moment, whether they're still going into the office or not. According to McKinsey, poor collaboration and misalignment of teams leads to productivity losses of 20 to 25% in knowledge worker roles. So again, having the wrong people in the wrong role on a team is costly, not only to the end product or the goal that you're trying to achieve, but also to that sense of employee satisfaction. And according to Harvard Business Review, miscommunication costs companies in the neighborhood of $420 million per year. And that jumps, $420,000 per year. And it jumps to about 62.4 million annually in companies with more than 100,000 employees. So why have I spent time giving you all of those statistics and all of those numbers? Do we still think it's the time invested up front to build the right high-performing team is too costly? So now let's take a little bit of time and talk about psychological safety. Many of you may be familiar with Amy Edmondson. She is out of Harvard University and has been studying psychological safety for years. This graphic that you're looking at is a graphic representation of one of her talks that I attended. And she quotes a number of her own research, but also a recent study by Workplace Options that says that we are really the number one concern of people in workplaces right now, and this is spanning 18 different countries, that it's really about the stress for the work that we're doing. It's the stress around thinking that I'm not valued, that I am constantly needing to think about my next opportunity or where I can go to be valued. Because when individuals feel unsafe in a team, members begin to compete with each other. So we're back to that place in the side-by-side graphic that I showed you, where it becomes more individual focused and less team focused. It becomes more transactional and less engaged. So team members may wind up undermining the team, even, because they believe or that it may elevate their own individual status. So again, how is the team being recognized and rewarded? Is it on an individual basis, or is there a team incentive that is attached to the work that's being done? Team members may try to hide their perceived weaknesses as well if they're not feeling valued or included or safe. And they won't ask for help, which again can deteriorate the product or the end result that you're coming into. So in a psychologically safe team, that sense of counterproductive competition is eliminated. The success of the team really is truly the most important. And one of the findings that Amy has come out with, and she says that it surprises her, more than anything else, because it's so counter to the way that she was raised and the way that a lot of organization cultures are, is that teams that are the best make the most mistakes, but they can talk about them. And they believe that it's safe to speak up and that the candor won't cost credibility and that mistakes are part of growth. And that isn't about being nice, it's about being real. And I'll tell you, as somebody with a really high will, sometimes it's really hard for me to admit that I don't know. But if I can think about the ultimate goal of the team, it's much easier to do that. And when I'm encouraged to speak up and say, I honestly don't know. I'm pretty confident that Tanya might know better than I do. So those mistakes are, again, part of the growth. So now I want to just think about for a minute, and I'm going to pose something that is sort of counter to everything I've been talking about so far, which is diversity isn't always best. And I'm curious the degree to which, come on, go to the next one, the degree to which you agree or disagree with that statement. So again, I think we're pop the link back into the chat. You've got we had the QR code there for a minute. It is the same poll. Somewhat agree. And as you're popping in, as folks are popping in the responses here, what might be some instances where we want less diversity on our teams? Just pop those into the chat and we'll visit them in a minute. Okay. Looks like the results are in. And we've got somewhat agree and somewhat disagree as the highest coming in. So part of why I'm not surprised to see the somewhats is that context matters. That mid-range is totally based on what's the context that we're talking about this within. So again, what's the end in mind? And part of what we want to think about is there psychological safety? Do I want to introduce someone new into that team or into a group of people if there isn't the sense of psychological safety? And it looks like Selma put in the chat, less diversity, very clear task or process, no need for the creativity. Exactly. We've got some teams where we may want to have, these are highly skilled teams, emergency response units, tactical teams, specialized in implementation. They practice and they bring a sense of diversity, but when working in the team, they need to have a clear command and control as opposed to, hey, wait a minute. Maybe we should try, hooking up the lift with the emergency sling that's going to take these people up to the helicopter differently. It really depends. And Sue is asking, what does it mean by diversity? I mean, all of that kind of diversity, diversity of skill set. I don't necessarily want the marketing person in the operating room. It's not the time for that. So we need to be intentional about the diversity and being really clear to think about it. So again, the narrow roles, time critical situations, low complexity, our friends at Facet are posing, and that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make here. It depends. And just as we're being very intentional about the broadness that we may want to have with the diversity, we also want to be clear about when we may want more specialized skills. And I just realized I hadn't switched back. So again, the question isn't, is diversity good? The question is, what does this team need to succeed? And have we built the conditions to support that diversity? So let's talk about tools for a minute. And truth be told, and hopefully, Grant, you're smiling. I love Facet5. And I'm not just saying that because they invited me to speak here today. In fact, I came into it very highly opinionated and became a very quick believer. I especially like Teamscape because in my 30 plus years as a practitioner, it's the best instrument that I've found. Facet's Teamscape surfaces personality dynamics that are really often invisible until there's friction. So again, that idea of let's go slow up front, find out who's here, rather than waiting until there's friction, and we've got to slow down anyway. Tools like Facet give us language to talk about decision making and decision making styles, how we handle conflict. Are we a completely conflict averse team? That's not necessarily a team that, well, first off, I wouldn't survive on that team or thrive on that team personally, but it's also not necessarily one that's going to drive the greatest amount of creativity. Likewise, one that needs a lot of creativity, we don't necessarily want that sense of super high controls we can only color within the lines. It also will help us with our inclusion preferences. And there are other tools that are there. When I think about inclusion preferences, I also think about I use FireOB a lot. For those of you who aren't necessarily practitioners, if you've got questions about any of these instruments, pop a note in the chat and I will get back to you. I'm happy to do that. The other thing I like about Facet is that it maps, or maybe I should say, Drexler-Seibert maps beautifully to that model for team development, maps beautifully to the way that we look at things in Teamscape and in Facet. Around the why are we here, the purpose and drive, that sense of openness and connection. And again, how will we get it? What is it that we're getting done and how will we get it done? So again, understanding the dimensions and the dynamics of how our team is diverse from a personality perspective, from how we approach decision making, from how we approach conflict, from how we want to engage with others. Am I low energy and prefer to only engage when it's really important or I have something to say? Understanding those things will help with the speed that we're able to move forward with. So again, most teams find this by accident, but with these kinds of tools and instruments, we can find it by design. And it matters because when people don't feel included, they leave. Now, they may not physically get up and go away, but they may just completely withdraw and hold back. Or they may actually leave, and they may leave right on out of the company if it isn't something that becomes part of the culture. This idea of creating psychological safety, of creating teams by design. Judith Katz of the acclaimed Khalil Jameson consulting firm, they're one of the very first diversity and inclusion firms that was ever founded in the US. She was working with a firm that lost 32 employees in a single year. And when she did the exit interview research, discovered that none of these people felt included. They felt like their contributions didn't matter. Their voice wasn't heard. They believed in the mission of the organization, but did not believe that they could be successful in helping to be a part of something that was going to bring that organization the success that it needed. And what they also found was that it cost nearly $100,000 per person to replace those people. So they lost productivity. The company lost productivity. They had to invest in ways to bring on, and that cost of attrition is expensive. So again, being intentional about this, it isn't just a nice to have. It's economically essential for the teams and the businesses that we're working with. Okay, you all may recognize Curly here. Okay, Curly is from one of my favorite movies. And we're going to just do another poll that is, what is the one thing that can make or break a team? And we'll jump over here to the Mentimeter and the one thing. So Curly is from a movie called, oh my gosh, it just went totally out of my head. Somebody help me. Um, I want to say Blazing Saddles. It was, City Slickers. And the idea was this cowboy who's trying to threaten these city slickers with, there's just one thing you've got to know. One thing that's important. And I'm curious what you all think that one thing is. And again, the link is in the chat if you missed the QR code. Give a minute for just a couple more responses. Looks like trust is leading the pack here. Anyone surprised by that? Trust, sense of belonging, clarity of purpose. Okay. So that sense of, trust is at the root of so much of team dynamics and high performance teams. Even being able to get that sense of belonging depends on whether or not I can trust that I feel like I belong. Can I trust that my voice will be heard? Clarity of purpose, can I ask, wait a minute, I don't understand what we're doing here. Or that idea of, have we gone off the rails, but nobody wants to bring us back to center because everybody's afraid to ask and maybe worrying that, that something just isn't quite there or ready. So, how do we build trust? Well, trust falls don't do it. Um, yes, I've been dropped. I have really bad experiences with trust falls. Um, don't know if any of the rest of you have either. And yes, so for sure, trust is deep set. Everything else derives from it. Absolutely. Maslow says air is a basic need. Trust is the air for teams. Could not agree more. Appreciate that. And so, how do we build trust? So, one last model. I do believe that the work that we do as organization development practitioners, as coaches, as human resource professionals, as managers and leaders, I truly believe that there is a science to that, which is why I tend to go to the models. I don't necessarily bring them to my clients. But the one last model that I want to share with you is the formula for trust. I've spent a good portion of the last 20 years of my life working with engineers. They like formulas because they're mathematical and they can understand them. This comes from an adaptation. Charlie Green and Andrea Howe have built a whole model around trusted advisor and bringing that sense of credibility to the people that we work with. And what they say is that that trust is the product of credibility, reliability, and intimacy divided by self-orientation. So credibility. Am I actually able to do the work that I say that I can do? Trust isn't going to come from incompetence. Reliability. Do I actually show up and do the things that I said I would do that people know that I'm capable of doing? Can they rely on me? Can you count on me? Or do I ghost my team? Intimacy. Am I willing to be a little bit vulnerable to share with you that I'm not the person you want if you want a team that's not going to have any kind of conflict or confrontation? Yes, it is. So trust is the product where we take the sum of credibility, reliability, and intimacy, and then divide it by self-orientation. Hopefully that makes sense, Alexandros. Um, so self-orientation is again, why am I here and what am I doing? Is my intention to show up as me and again that individual perspective on the team, and that's why I'm coming forward with what I'm credible for and known for doing. I'm always showing up, and maybe my intimacy may or may not be genuine. Do I want to know about you because I want to know about you, or am I trying to learn things that might give me that edge? So that sense of self-orientation is very important. And it needs to be balanced against the sum. So hopefully that makes sense. That trust isn't a vibe, it's a discipline. And it's the foundation for every high-performing team. So as we sort of begin to round this out, and I've also got a handout that will get posted in the chat, I believe, at the end. If you want high performance, find clarity of purpose. That was actually one of the things that, what's the one thing? So that clarity of purpose. Develop a culture of inclusion. Build a foundation of trust. Leverage tools for understanding. Nurture that mindset that really seeks diversity as a resource and the right kind of diversity at the right time for what you're trying to do. So really see it as a resource, not as a risk. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Because high-performing teams aren't accidents. They're established deliberately with courage with clarity, with care. And that means that we have to challenge outdated leadership models and say, slow down. We need to challenge current political trends. It means moving beyond performative diversity and equity activities and into a daily practice that makes inclusion and belonging real. It means being clear on what kind of culture you're building and who gets to shape it. Because here's the truth. Diversity is a fact. Equity is a choice. Inclusion is a practice. Belonging is an outcome. And high performance, that's what happens when you put all of these things together and you build it intentionally on purpose. So if you would for me in the chat, I hope you've gotten something out of our time together. But what's one thing, back to Curly, what's one thing that you might take forward and do just a little bit differently for the rest of your day to day? One thing that you might noodle on or think about or share with someone else. I'd appreciate that feedback. And it has been an absolute pleasure to be with you all today. If there is ever anything I can do to be of service to you, please don't hesitate to reach out. This particular QR code doesn't go to a Mentimeter. It goes to my website, and also can link you to me. Okay, focus on intentionality. I love it. Trust is an imperative. Love it. I saw something about Drexler Sibbett there. Yep, and hopefully that, yep, there's the cheat sheet on Drexler Sibbett, and then there was another cheat sheet that'll get added, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's just loading now.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you very much. Has anyone got any questions? We've still got 10 minutes of Martha's time, so please just turn your camera back on and unmute and ask away. I'm really happy to take any questions now, or you can ask them in the chat as well. Yeah,
I have a question.
yeah,
Hey,
fire away.
Eileen.
Hi. Going back to the trust, credibility plus reliability, but plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. Can you describe like self-orientation again?
So self-orientation is that why am I showing up? Is it about me or is it about us?
Gotcha.
Am I more focused on, hey, look at what I contributed to the team? Look at how often I showed up versus more thinking about it from a standpoint of I'm glad I could do my part.
You might like to think about how altruistic you actually are. Are you putting other people's needs first, or does your need come first?
Gotcha.
There's another
Thank you.
question in here from Claudio, which is how would you start working with a team with low affection overall?
I think, again, what I would do is for low affection would be really focusing on what is the purpose and who are we and what are sort of the tangible reasons that we're coming together. And that sense of understanding may begin to develop some appreciation. So an appreciation for who I am and an appreciation for who you are, so that it'll begin to also tap into some of our other facets, things like, my degree of will and, okay, I am appreciated, therefore I can show up a little bit more fully and be more appreciated, and see the value that you're bringing to the team as well. It's going to require a little bit more intentionality, but again, knowing that up front, using a tool as you're beginning to develop the team can help you address some of those things and design a team intervention, or not necessarily an intervention because you're not coming in after there's a problem, but help to design a team launch that addresses some of those things.
Right.
So again, just
So
being
that,
really
yeah,
intentional about it.
yeah, pragmatism about being clear, and trust is earned, not given, and it's a demonstration of trust as well. And don't over expect um, intimate moments. You expect clarity and pragmatism. I think, in my experience working with low affection people as well. Another question there from Selma, which is, can you elaborate a bit more on working with Facet5 emotionality factors in teams?
So again, I think, as we all know, emotionality is really sort of that overlay to all of the other facets. And I guess when I've got a team that is higher emotionality, um, again, we want to address that. So if we think about emotionality, I like to think about it sometimes as people who are lower emotionality, nothing's going to happen. Everything's going to work out in the end. People who are in that mid-range, well, we'll figure it out as we go along. And people on that higher end that you're talking about, I think you were talking a little bit about, or maybe not, but if they're on the higher end, everything, we need to plan out every scenario. And so I think it's sort of walking them back down just a little bit on the ladder of inference around what is the data that we have that's having us need to necessarily, do we think that that's actually something that we need to play out? So not dismissing the higher end, also challenging the lower end of emotionality that says, oh, we've got this. Okay, we're coming up on a deadline. Now, I don't know that we need to work every night and every weekend to get there, but we do need to be working on this because it's not just all going to automatically work out. So again, it's knowing that about my team and being able to help balance someone who's got lower emotionality and higher emotionality through deliberate conversation. Because again, high performing teams are teams that can talk about these things. That 40% where we're talking about how the work's going to get done, what is it that we really need to be focusing on? Do I need to be focusing on and dialing up some of the urgency? Or is this a place where we need to take our time and do a little deeper research? Does that help? Thank you. Love your background, by the way.